Hi, I'm Kristen. Disrupting traditional management consulting through the power of AI technology is not just a movement, it's the heart of our mission. Here at Culturefy, we're empowering leaders and employees to take action. But more importantly, we're dedicated to creating work-life cultures that are world-changing. I'm so excited that you decided to join us today to be part of this roundtable discussion as we explore what's trending in HR. Good morning. Welcome to What's Trending in HR. We're really excited to continue this series, unpacking another trending topic for 2024, elevating engagement through well-being. Now, at a time when employee wellness directly influences organizational success, this topic is more and critical than ever when it comes to building organizational cultures that attract and retain talent. If you're new to our series, every week we're joined by a panel of subject matter experts and thought leaders in the space. And today, I'm really excited to introduce you to three leaders joining us today, and I want to give them a chance to introduce themselves. So first up, we have Paula Dobbs, who is a licensed clinical therapist and project director for the Violence Prevention and Intervention Program at Spelman College. Paula, thanks so much for being here today. Would you care to say a few words as introduction?
Sure. Yes. Thank you so much for having me. As Kristen stated, I am the project director for our Violence Prevention and Intervention Program here at Spelman College. And I also have a private practice as a therapist, release therapy and wellness. And my overall focus is really providing assistance to those who have experienced trauma in their life, and as well as to make our workplace a better place and a more enjoyable experience.
Thank you so much for being here, Paula. I'm excited as we think more about how to embrace our teams and our people holistically. I'm really excited to hear from your experience, kind of dive into some of what you've been seeing and learning. So thank you for being here. We also have Derek Lunson, President and Chief Culture Officer at Life Guides, joining us today. Derek, thanks so much for being here. Would you care to share a little bit more about yourself and Life Guides?
Sure. Thank you for having me as well. I was really honored to be here. Obviously, culture is important since that's in my title. But Life Guides, I have the opportunity to lead the mission of what we're doing, which is to build a platform connecting people who have been through life experiences, events, or challenges to be personal guides or mentors, people going through those same experiences, events, or challenges, whether it be in or outside the workplace. And we've trademarked this idea of it's more casual than therapy, more qualified than a friend. And we work with different partners, both clinical and other providers, to help make sure that people are getting the right support that they need. And we've been building this business over the last 7.5 years, and it's been a fascinating journey, which I'm happy to share more about as we jump into the topic here. On a personal level, I'm also a dad of 3 young children and working on building a culture in my home that mirrors what we're trying to create in the world. So thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. I love that. More casual than therapy, more qualified than a friend. It meets that middle ground that I think sometimes we need to find when we speak about this topic of health, wellness, well-being. So I love that. I'm excited to dive in. And finally, we have our very own Lucinda Smith. She is our Senior Culture Advisor here at Culturefy. Thanks for joining the conversation today, Lucinda. Would you care to say a few words as introduction?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Kristen. And it's great to be joining Derek and Paula here today. I am going to be kind of speaking from the human resources lens and speaking about some trends and some of my past experiences. I'm currently, in addition to what I do at Culturefy, a senior culture advisor. I'm a senior executive advisor for the Society for Human Resource Management. And I work with human resources leaders, chief people officers, chief culture officers, and advise them on HR trends and talk about what they're working on and their challenges. And I can tell you through these conversations that I have on a regular basis, this is top of mind in organizations and with human resources leaders and professionals. So I've got that experience as well as being head of human resources for a number of years and implementing various programs and also seeing how those programs have evolved over time. And it's changed quite a lot and for the better. So I'm excited to talk about all of this with the panel here today. And we're looking forward to hopefully some good questions from our audience. Thanks.
Yes, Absolutely. Thank you, Lucinda. And that's a great plug for those who are joining us live. We do have a chat that we would love for you to be part of, connect, have conversation with each other. We know that, this is a webinar, so it's hard to have that interaction, but we really want to make the most of the chat, and then especially our Q&A. So make sure you find that. It should be at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Please drop in questions as they come up throughout the conversation. I have a number of questions that I'm ready to dive in with our panelists, but I don't want to be the only one asking questions. So please utilize that, and I'll try to pull in as many as we can so that your questions get answered by our panelists today as well. And today, as Lucinda mentioned, we're talking about well-being initiatives that are so critical in today's organizational cultures and looking at what employees are looking for to stick around. So I'll give you the not so shocking hint that it's not just monetary perks and benefits, but it's cultures that are embracing them holistically. So we show up into the office and we don't just turn off our experiences, good and bad, in our life. And so more and more organizations are saying, how do we build a culture that embraces this and really supports our people with their diverse experiences? And so I'm really excited to dive into that. Now, to kick off the conversation, I want to share a few quick stats from a Workday 2024 Trends report. So as you know, we're talking about trends, and as we were doing some research, this topic of well-being and engagement was just really top of mind in the conversation. So I want to just throw out some quick quotes and stats to get the conversation started. So in 2024, understanding employee health and well-being is not optional, but essential for the success of any transformation and change initiatives. And the same report also saw a drop in health and well-being scores when studied over the year from Q2 of 2022 to Q2 of 2023, which is really signaling an urgent need for integrating well-being strategies. So if organizations haven't already, this needs to be paramount moving forward. And those who are, it's really saying, how can we continue to do this and adapt them to what our people are needing in this new world of work, as we like to say here at Culturefy. So we'll talk a little bit more about how this trend has been evolving in a second. And with this in mind, I also want to talk a little bit about some of the stats that we've heard around both the importance of transparency between leadership and teams, especially in terms of reducing stress and performance related to organizational change, as well as the trend of exploring the importance of non-financial recognition, with 55% of employees surveyed in this stat wanting more when it comes to rewards and recognition in the workplace. So, this is an interesting conversation when it comes to wellness and well-being. How do we build cultures that are providing that in terms of rewards and recognition to engage, but also retain our people, right? People are wanting more than maybe they used to. So we can talk a little bit more about that as we get going. So with that there, I know there's a ton to unpack. So Derek, I would love to throw it to you. So in your experience, how has the concept of employee well-being evolved over the last few years, especially in the context of some of these HR trends that are popping up in 2024?
Sure. Yeah. So first and foremost, I'll just say it's hard to believe that we're coming into 5 years now when you think about pre-pandemic versus the pandemic and now post-pandemic, which we're very much in the tail of the pandemic from my point of view, the TAIL, even though the tail is also, I talk about that, it's the story of the pandemic and how it's changed the world of work and our lives broadly. But I think over the last 4 years and kind of prior, we saw this movement towards physical well-being. In the heat of the pandemic, we saw a movement heavily towards mental health and the balance of that around well-being, just the prioritization of that. And I think now we're moving into this phase of looking at wholeness and holistic well-being in all aspects of one's life, and recognizing that each of us has different situations, different needs, different desires. And because of the world of technology and the way that we've evolved over the last few years, companies and organizations are getting better at addressing those needs. And it goes into the fact that we've got, soon to be 6 generations in the workforce. The needs of those generations are varied, obviously, depending on the life situations. And there's a real movement, towards how do we balance this topic of empathetic leadership, which we saw a real shift towards over the last few years, with the balance of candor and feedback and performance, because we're reconciling the different considerations that have come through over the last few years. Because I personally saw a lot of companies during the pandemic respond very very well to maintain employment, to offer perks, to offer benefits, to address the needs of the whole family. And I think that's another important topic that pre-pandemic, there was a real shift around individual talent attraction and incentivization. Now we think about family systems overall, right? And in the world of hybrid work, that's a topic that's very relevant to parents, to caregivers, to people that are coming out of university and starting their careers, to those who are on the tail end of their careers, thinking about retirement and transferring that knowledge. There's a lot of thinking right now. And then you look at the complexity of the world that we live in. There was that statistic that you shared, Kristen. That, in my opinion, that data reflects the prolonged stress and burnout of change that people had in that 2020 to 2022 period. Finally, there was a moment of quote unquote release where people are like, okay, things are starting to get back to normal. And then last year we had the realization, the reckoning of, okay, we need to start looking at refining our businesses to get more efficient financially. We had the stress geopolitically, what's going on in Ukraine and in the Middle East and in Israel and Gaza, and all the different things that are leading up to the election there this year. And that is then once again just compounding with the stress of what's going on in people's personal lives, from a financial standpoint, from an expectation standpoint, from where the role responsibilities are between what companies provide and what employees and their families have in terms of personal responsibility. And we're still resolving that. And I think we're getting better at it, which is the great news. I think people are communicating more effectively. Companies are creating different resources to address those personalized needs. Now we're at a point, back to the topic, where engagement and utilization is very much a topic for how do we make sure that people are aware, educated, and activating the tools and services that they're being given by these companies if we want to maintain them. And also to make sure that we're driving meaningful business results and outcomes from those investments. And that's something that I know personally the C-suite and board directors are looking at in our businesses. And so employees need to be very aware of these considerations and plan accordingly. So that's a quick answer on some of the things that we're seeing, but it's been an exciting, dynamic few years. I think when you look at the broader healthcare benefits landscape of the coming 5 years, particularly with the role of artificial intelligence and other things that are coming online, it's going to be a wild ride, and it's going to be exciting. So if we thought the last 5 years were intensive change, buckle up. That's my advice.
Wow, I don't know if that's reassuring or anxiety inducing. Thinking ahead, but I think you're right. I mean, so much has changed in the last 5 years. And, when you think about all the changes that we've gone through as society, as a world, and then even recently, with layoffs happening more and more at higher numbers with companies, I mean, that navigating change management in a way that prioritizes performance, but also the health and wellness of your people, especially those who remain, is really critical. Paula, I'd love to throw it to you and just get your thoughts on what you've seen change. And we did have a question in the chat that I'll throw out to anybody. How would you define employee well-being and the components that go into that? I think that's an interesting question for those who might be joining, who are maybe newer to this conversation. I mean, it kind of is an all-encompassing word, but how do we define that?
Well, that's a really great question. I think looking at employee well-being is really looking at the whole employee and not just at their role and their responsibilities. It's looking at them as a person. Of course, they get paid to come into work to perform and to provide. However, when they're coming into work, what are they carrying? What are they bringing with them? What are they holding on their shoulders? So sometimes it's taking a step back and recognizing, oh, they may be in their office a little bit more. Their door may be closed more. What is going on? And so it's taking a step back and looking and saying, let me just ask this question. Are you okay? Has something changed in life? Even noticing, of course, since the pandemic or during the pandemic, we lost people at a rate that generations have never seen. So it's really paying attention to that and saying, okay, what load are they carrying? I work with individuals who may have lost family members to violent crimes. And so it's really, you would never know if you don't ask the question. I just so happened to be sharing that one day at work and learned that a colleague of mine lost someone in that manner. And it opened up a discussion that they would have never had if I hadn't have shared what I do outside of Spelman College. So it's really being transparent and caring about the whole person instead of what they have to offer in performance wise. So it's, how are your children? Do you have children? Of course, everyone doesn't want a personal relationship at work. And so it's knowing how to recognize that, where to cut it off, but still offering it. Also recognizing as well-being, how can we make things a little bit easier at work? So one thing that I've kind of implemented here at Spelman College is, okay, I know breakfast can be hard for a lot of people. So my office is kind of small, but let me purchase breakfast. And leave it in the refrigerator. Hey, we have yogurt in the refrigerator. We have fruit here. So if you're running late, all you have to do is just come and grab one out. So that can really change the trajectory of someone's day, and really just help it to be a little bit better. It really, for me, the well-being is, what does that person need in that moment? How can you recognize an employee no matter what level they are on? So for me, when my cleaning crew comes through and cleans the bathroom, I stop them and I give them praises. It's also maybe coming up with a wall that allows other people to offer gratitude for various things, instead of just waiting to give out awards during the monthly award moment, but really just speaking to the whole person, and providing opportunities for them to be able to express themselves, but to feel appreciated. I work on our staff council here. So we're creating an event with our human resources department to be able to allow our staff to have a day of fun. It's almost, we're trying to bring back that fifth grade field day type feel. And so it's really giving them that moment and time away from the computer that says, hey, let's have a basketball shootout. Let's play, well, we're going to incorporate playing some board games, but also some cornhole, and then meditation. And we also have an event coming up during that particular session where we'll have a session on laughter and humor. So it's incorporating various options for your staff to be able to identify where they fit, and creating groups. So I'm going to lead a group that's called the Tree Huggers. And I have another staff member who will also incorporate and lead a group that's called Shower Singers. And so it's just giving your employees options to freely be themselves at work, and so they don't feel like they have to hide who they are and transition as soon as they hit company what is it, landscape, or the company environment. They don't have to shift. They know who I am. I love to sing in the shower, even though I'm horrible. But that's, just giving the options, really taking that person's identity into consideration and offering. Of course, we can't accommodate everyone, but just giving something to give somebody a feeling of, they really care about me. I really enjoy being here, and therefore it's going to increase their performance as well.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, it's just thinking of ways that you can, like you said, those kind of low barrier ways that you can engage and welcome people to show up authentically and bring who they are. So I love that. And, there's more and more tools out there that are helping to do this, especially when there's teams that are remote or hybrid, because that makes it harder, right? It's easier to go down the hall and have those interactions with colleagues, to really have that, to get to know you on a personal level. But sometimes with the hybrid remote work, it makes it a little bit more challenging. So finding those platforms and technology that can really help bring people together, easily facilitate employee resource groups, allow for that kind of that fun while still driving performance, I think is so critical. Lucinda, I would love to get your perspective too, from your experience. What have you seen organizations do that is working well in this space, maybe within the last 5 years, like Derek had mentioned, of just how things have been changing and organizations are trying to prioritize this a little bit more?
Yeah, thanks. Like everyone has said, I mean, there's just so much going on now in this space, and it's so important. I mean, I started a long time ago in HR, and in the 90s, we were into employee wellness, and that was, primarily to help, certainly we were concerned about employees' health, but it also helped the company reduce their medical costs. And there was, it was kind of a win-win for everybody. But there's just such a very important and critical focus on mental well-being, and there are so many different ways to approach this now. One of the things I saw though in the chat was a question about, how do you know? I think that's, it's great, we're doing all of these things, but how do you know if it's actually working? And there's some information out there now where, a lot of companies will conduct a survey, an employee, climate survey, and they are incorporating well-being questions into these surveys. So looking at career well-being, it's holistic, as Paula said, looking at, do the employees like what they do? Do they feel like they're contributing? Do they have a friend at work? Are they financially, well? How do they manage their finances well? And does the organization give them tools to do that? Physically, are they well? Do they have enough energy? Are they going, to do their preventive checkups? And then community well-being too, loving where they live. And these elements really translate to, a healthy employee, along with, the mental health aspect. So I'm not sure that I answered all of your question, Kristen. We can keep going and going on this, but I wanted to mention that and bring that up since I did see it as a question in the chat there.
Yeah,
Can
no,
I add?
I think that, yeah, go ahead, Paula.
So I just want to say a way to track it is seeing how employees show up to events that are offered. So a lot of the times, if they are not feeling connected, they're not going to show up. But the moment that you do start offering activities, programs that really speak to your staff and they feel the authenticity coming from senior management or administration, then they will definitely show up. And so I think that's a great way to kind of track that. But also a survey, just a simple one button question can go far. So incorporating that into a platform where you can get quick results and they can see like, oh, other people really enjoy this. Maybe I should go and see who's really enjoying the environment and how can I feel the same way, or how are they receiving encouragement and support that pushes them to really enjoy working in their space.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll just
Go
take
ahead,
this.
Derek.
I agree with everything that's been said, and I'll just add another dimension around this as well, which is a critical part of this problem solution set, but it's hard to measure, which is the role of just managers, broadly speaking, the managers in the organization. And managers broadly have been tasked with a huge amount of change over the last few years in their own lives, as well as how they manage people in this new environment of work. The expectations among the younger generations, especially, and I had one colleague the other day talked about how managers were playing the role of both manager and supervisor and parent to many employees in this environment. They're helping them, to your comment, Lucinda, learn about how to do financial management, right? The things that we've learned throughout our careers, they don't have that same level of access. And so there's a struggle point. So I think I bring that up because as organizations, I know, from the Workday report as well as Person report and others, we've talked about the fact that leadership development, management development, that investments there are the lowest that they've been in several years. They're starting to come back to pre-pandemic levels because people are trying to figure out, how do we do this? Where do we invest effectively? And I think that when you're talking about that relationship, we also know that that's the number one driver of stress, right? When you look at the outcomes that are reported, people's manager relationship is a key driver on how well they are perceived, that the company cares about them, that their careers have a progression in them, that it's the relationship where they can define expectations of how performance is taking place. And I think we just need to do a much better job collectively on focusing there, on giving managers resources, on helping to foster those conversations, on measuring the outcomes mutually on both of those, on what's taking place there. And I think that goes back to just, again, employee well-being. It's kind of in four main categories besides just its employees in life. It's awareness, it's access, right? And so this is mutuality of that, activation, and then accountability. And each of us, from an employer to an employee, from a manager to an employee or a human person, we all have a role in both of those, in all four of those quadrants across that entire dimension spectrum that you've given voice to, Lucinda. So And I completely agree, Paul. That's a critical part of how leadership shows up and management shows up. We need to do a better job of helping people through this transition.
Absolutely. And Derek, I mean, and I'll throw this out to everybody. I mean, so if somebody on the call is listening saying, you know, well, maybe my team is so small, I'm stretched, how do I, we had somebody in the chat mention that when we're talking about holistically, we have to be thinking mental, physical, emotional health of the person, not just performance. And that's a lot. So if somebody's, you know, listening and saying, okay, I love this, this absolutely aligns with our brand's mission, vision, values. We want to send out the survey and hear what is important to our people. But how do we get started? Maybe we're beginning to understand what we need to put in place, but what are some things that you're seeing at organizations of all sizes that are working really well? And maybe how does somebody even get started if they're saying, I want to, but I'm looking at my to-do list, I'm looking at all the people I manage, and I just don't know where to start.
Well, that's a great question. I can jump in on a kind of a small level here. Within my department and within Spelman, it's where to get started, just ask the question. So for me, like I mentioned earlier about just grief and death over the last 4 years, as we get notifications of employees losing a family member, my team has made an effort to create cards to send out once we get those messages and email them out just to say, hey, we're sending our condolences. And then I've taken it a step further and just asking someone, would you join a grief group if we offered that here on campus for our staff members? And the overall answer has 100% has been yes. And so it's really just asking the question and you start from there and you build. And so it's one, because the employees want to know that you care. And so once you can start that dialogue, then they'll start to open up and you will see the areas that you can focus on first. You can't tackle everything at once, because if so, it's going to fail. So you want to definitely say, okay, can we focus on mental health right now? What can we offer? It may be in our wellness center here, Spelman has taken on has taken well-being on to the point where they've created a position for a dean of well-being and wellness, so that can be in the forefront of all that we do. And so with that, they offer sound baths for sound therapy, meditation, various options that for 30 minutes you can go fall asleep on the gym floor on a mat during sound therapy. But it's just starting somewhere and not looking at the task as though it's going to be impossible to accomplish, but just one question. Start with one question and be personable.
I love that. A dean of well-being. That sounds amazing. Where do I sign up?
I'll have to give the answer, at least acknowledging what we're doing at Life Guides, because I do think that is a critical element that any organization, all organizations should be applying as a way to get started. So again, just what the Life Guides platform is, it's a marketplace that allows you to connect with someone who's been through that particular situation, successfully navigated it. And it's all different aspects of life, whether it be caring for aging parents, to becoming a new parent, relocating across the country for promotion, grief and loss that are unexpected, transitioning from active duty military to civilian life, navigating disabilities or special needs parenting, you name it. There's hundreds of topics and soon to be thousands of topics where we have individualized human guides that are an outlet for people to talk to get perspective, to express themselves, to get feedback. And then the important thing is, from a technology standpoint, our intellectual property called intelligence assistance allows us to integrate into the different benefits and services that a company offers for just-in-time care. So if there's financial resources, if there's caregiving resources, if there's mental health resources, our tech helps flag that immediately in the conversations so that people know the tools and benefits that companies are making available to them and their families in that moment. And the last thing I'll say is that beyond the human relationship of the guides and the choice that happens in those interactions and the technological piece, we are focusing around how do we get more access to empathetic leadership. How do we equip managers in these conversations? And there's a whole element that we apply on top of, complementary to the Life Guides platform, related to manager activation, related to leadership and empathetic leadership, related to access across the board, including live events on all different topics. So if an organization has questions around maternity leave or around stress management or around some of the topics that you mentioned, Paula, our guides will come in and do virtual kind of sessions similar to this, helping people be aware of the platform. And then we tie that into all the different partnerships that are in the ecosystem, from healthcare to mental health to financial and so forth. So I highly recommend organizations take a look at Life Guides.
Yeah, excuse me, I love that too because of the technology component, right? I mean, at Culturefy, we're all about AI technology and empowering organizations with that. So the ability to leverage AI, like you're saying, to provide the resources that are needed for individuals, a little bit tailored, it sounds like, to their needs and connecting them with the right support. At Culturefy, we very much want to help clients leverage AI technology to make life easier and to help cultivate that culture, right? So if in your organizational culture, you are wanting to provide more of this tailored support that you're speaking about, Derek, I mean, there's technology out there that can help do that and platforms that can make this much easier. Sometimes I think we think about AI technology and think, oh my gosh, that sounds over my head, or is it taking over? But there's so many benefits of being able to leverage it in a way that is tailored to your organization because of the uniqueness of our individual cultures in our organizations. And so I think that's what is really unique, is the ability to tailor our culture to our unique brand's mission, vision, and values. So I think that's something that is really exciting as we are moving forward in this wellness discussion and well-being discussion. This doesn't have to look the same for every organization, right? It can be absolutely tailored to your people's needs, and your organization.
That's exactly right. Thank you for that.
Well, I'd love to talk a little bit too, to go back to one of the stats that I flagged at the beginning, talking about rewards and recognition. And I think all of you guys mentioned the connection between wellness and well-being to performance. So when we think about that, we sometimes think about rewards and recognition and financial benefits and motivations and rewards. But it seems like now more than ever, there's a shift to wanting non-monetary rewards and recognition. So I'm wondering how can we tie rewards and recognition to this well-being, wellness conversation? What does that look like? What have you seen people discuss, or what are people discussing in this space?
Yeah, Kristen, I'll take that one. And I'm sure that Derek and Paula have a lot of great examples too. But one of the things I've seen and kind of been involved with is employees, you go through the employee milestones, the 1 year, 5 years, whatever, and hey, great, and here's a certificate, or here's a pin or something like that. But, that's kind of canned, if you ask me. People want, as we've said already, they want to be appreciated for who they are, for what they do, for their whole self. So one of the things, I've always done as a manager is you got to know what motivates people. And when you know what motivates people, then that goes a long way, and everybody's different. So you can't apply this like spreading peanut butter on a piece of bread. You've got to take the time as a manager and understand what motivates people, what gets them excited to come to work. It's the question about, your family and that kind of thing. And that, people like to talk about that, or they like to talk about what they do on the weekend in sports and things like that. But the other thing I've seen that works really well is, and you can do this in a number of ways, but certainly, electronically, you can do it through a platform, is celebrate moments that matter to people. And, you got to know the person before you can celebrate the moments that matter. And you got to really take the time, but it's, marriages, births, people getting degrees, or, accomplishments of people's children. But that, I think that key is moments that matter, to the individual. And it takes time and interest on the part of the manager, but it goes such a long way, and it's so important. And it's not just employee to manager, but it's a 360-degree view in an organization, with the team too. And I think that is a very effective way to really help motivate people, to make them feel better about who they are, what they do, and how they're, contributing in an organization.
I don't have a whole lot to add to that. I think that's well said. Listen, I think hyper personalization is where we're moving to around incentives and around benefits and around these different components. And we're getting the technology is now existing to help integrate that and for us to track that financially and the impact it's having. But yeah, I fully agree that what matters to one person is not what matters or is needed by another. And our ability to adapt to that and provide that is a distinguishing advantage for companies.
Mhm. And I actually agree with Lucinda on the moments that matter. I love that because a lot of times, like I mentioned earlier, people just want to feel, they want to feel seen and heard. So even if it's a matter of you realize that they like going hiking, you know, asking them what was the last time, or if they enjoy horseback riding or things of that nature, but really just making it personable. Those moments that matter, like that, I think that should be a slogan. That can definitely be a t-shirt.
Celebrating the moments that matter. I love that. What about if we have a hybrid team? How does this work in a hybrid context? As we have people who are remote, people who are coming into the office, I feel like we can't get away from that reality, and that's one of those things that have been left over from the 2020 changes that just transformed organizations. How can we implement that personal touch for teams that are maybe scattered across the world or across cities?
That I think is we're still very much in the thick of that experiment and evolution. I know we spent a lot of last year talking about return to office and hybrid, but I feel like a lot of lessons were learned in that process related to what employees want or don't want, what employees need and don't need, and how we incentivize and engage people in different environments. And I think again, some people really love being remote. Some people really love the community of being in person. That to your point, Lucinda, oftentimes those moments that matter for celebrating them effectively require that deep in-person experience to multiply the effect of that. And so I think there's, and there's a lot of considerations that go into right now. Why are we doing hybrid? Is it about the investments in real estate? Is it about the team? Is it about performance? We know that frankly, the people who are not performing as well, the data shows it's because we are remote, right? That's just the reality. They don't have that same level of interaction. That kinetic activity of quick learning, of sharing, helps to inspire and to give people the chance to lift them up. So, Paul, to your comment, the level of awareness is needed on the part of people to be checking in when you're in a remote environment. It's so much easier just to say, oh, Zoom meeting or Microsoft Team meetings, it's over. I'm done with that. And I'm not going to see that person for a whole week potentially. So much life and so many things happen in that amount of time that change how people show up. And that synchronicity, those moments that, again, those small moments are missing oftentimes. And so we see companies really trying to figure this out. We have, if you know Keith Barrazi, he's talked about this idea of on-sites, right? So every quarter he brings their team together for 2 weeks, and they literally are at the office all together for 2 weeks straight. They figure out their high priority items, and they go back and they do their asynchronous work, and they execute. There was a report just the other day talking about, I forget who wrote it, but it was an Atlassian study. They did a study where they did 2 different groups looking at how they structured their calendar and their time related to giving time for deep work versus meetings, because meetings are dominating people's calendars. That the amount of meetings that have happened have exploded. I think it's 2,000%, something like that, on a different calendar. Wow. So people don't have enough time to do their work. And so trying to create new structures for how we collaborate and get into performance is part of it. And so I think we're still in the early stages, frankly, of this. It's going to continue to evolve for the next few years. We're learning, we're trying things. I think there needs to be a lot of grace and willingness to try and say, hey, we're trying this now, and we're going to try something else soon if we need to. And that has to be the expectation of everyone in this environment. And we saw how quickly we could adapt during the pandemic. It was, I always joke, digital transformation took 2 decades until it took 2 days, right? And so that's the funny part about this. So we know we can do it. We just need to have the will and the humanity to see this through.
Right. And it sounds like there is some ownership on the individual team members too. So if you are hybrid and maybe you work well with that, or you have to be hybrid for your role, or remote, I mean, there's an element of onus on you. And so maybe it's a way of helping to educate those team members on how to really show up in that way. In a way that connects with the team. And I think nowadays, there are, going back to the technology at Culturefy, we always talk about different ways of bringing people together, but there is that level of onus. So maybe it's about helping to educate your team and how to show up and how to schedule those virtual coffee chats that are kind of like those water cooler chats, to have those touch points that you would have more naturally in an office situation. But you can still do that. It just might take a little bit more intentionality. And then we had a comment in the chat, which I thought, from Deborah, which I thought was really interesting. Says, my company has set rewards and recognitions part of as part of their goals for managers and supervisors, with very targeted actions for supporting employees. So I love that organizations are saying this is so important that we want to really set that as a goal and a priority for our managers and supervisors. And then I'm sure that trickles down to the individual level when they see that modeled.
I wanted to jump in really quickly with something Derek stated about giving grace. And definitely as we navigate the hybrid world, the remote world, yes, we do need grace. We also need to make sure, we're trying. So if there's an employee meeting and you are doing painting, well, maybe you should try to see if it's within the budget, or make a budget for it to mail packages to the hybrid or remote employees, so that they can also log in and participate. Not to assume like that everybody has resources available to be able to join in painting, but making them feel like a part of the team, like they are right there, would be a great option. Or doing something that doesn't require necessarily physical tools, but playing a game online, or just incorporating options for them to feel like they are right there participating, and that they're not really missing a step other than that physical energy being exchanged.
Yeah, I love that. Another comment in the chat said something to your point, Paula, about just starting meetings with just a quick check-in. So before diving into the business of the day, which we know is important, but leaving time for just, how are you doing? What's an update? Sharing a recipe, celebrating a life milestone if something fun happens, or that you want to celebrate with those that you spend so much time working with, and just building in that capacity for that. I think that's a great example in the chat of something that's working. We also had another question come in the Q&A. So what are the roles and responsibilities of leadership to ensure that these well-being initiatives are successful? And I think a few of you touched on this a little bit at the beginning, but I think there's a lot there. So what advice would you say, or how would you help navigate that?
Yeah, I think certainly a company needs to fund these kinds of initiatives. So that's number one. But I think just in general terms, leaders, the stereotypical leader was, okay, stoic, I'm not going to get personal. I've got my game face on, that sort of thing. And I think a lot of leaders now, we're talking about vulnerability in leadership. They're shedding that stoicism and sharing those vulnerabilities as human beings. And I think we have to meet together, as human beings like that, not kind of, leader subordinate kind of thing. But this, I think, sets the tone and an example across an organization. And I think one of our members and watching here today and participating talked about, having those metrics. I mean, that's something too that really needs to be in the forefront, and there needs to be accountability. But leaders should also be sharing how they, do this. How do they take care of their mental well-being and their physical well-being? And again, just, bring the human side to work. And we're all in this together, and nobody's above anything. And I think it's, really just relating on a human level.
Completely agree on that. Obviously, leaders are it's a requisite for us to model that to our teams, right? That's just the reality. And I completely agree that when you share aspects of that, of the challenges, of the struggles, of the opportunity for growth, we all have that. That's part of being human, right? And that's also part of the underpinning of our teams and what allows for great teams to happen when you have that level of trust and understanding and a deeper level of relationship. And so, yeah, I completely agree. And I think that when leaders set the pace in that respect, people are more willing to try things that are outside their comfort zone. So, and that's been proven time and again. And I think that we saw that, that was one of the key highlights of the pandemic was that we saw, CEOs and other leaders leaning into that, and people saw another side to people's families and how they spend their time and their personal activities, and that blended in. And I think that's something that's been really a nice continuation since that time, and I think we'll continue to see something we develop.
I agree with both Derek and Lucinda. It is very important for leadership to be accessible, to be personable. So if there's an initiative being rolled out, to be there, to show up, to if it's you're rolling out offering mental health days to your staff members, letting them know, oh, I took a mental health day, or, standing behind an initiative and not just rolling it out or letting HR handle it, but just showing the importance that it is an important mission to you. Our president here at Spelman, Dr. Gail, has made an effort to have these little small meetings with the staff, to have a lunch and basically kind of like a chat and choose session, where we can sit down and talk with her, ask questions, and really have her present and accessible so that we see, one, that she is accessible, but that we can also, if there's a question that we want to ask, that her ears are open and she is willing to answer and to participate, and that the playing field at that time is kind of level. We're all here eating from the same place, same time, and I see you. So again, it just goes back to being seen and heard.
I love that, being seen and heard and showing that even at the leadership level, you're still human, right? And there's ability to connect, even with your team, regardless of what level or where they're working. I think that's really powerful. We did have another question in the chat, in the Q&A, that I wanted to get through as we are wrapping up our time. So outside of monetary incentives, what are other rewards and recognition options that employees are responding positively to? So we talked a lot big picture, but there are specific things that companies are instituting in this space that are really working well.
So I'll just say that when we think about total rewards, broadly speaking, that goes back to all different elements. So we'll just talk about different scenarios. It could be reimbursement for education to complete that, or to help pay back certain financial responsibilities that people have incurred. It could be related to helping offset the burden of caregiving through concierge and access to care models. It could be, fun things like a vacation allowance or extra time that's been being used for personal pursuits in or outside the workplace. And again, it goes back to what we talked about earlier, identifying what matters to that particular employee and their family, and creating pathways for them to achieve or receive that based on their certain contributions. And there's on all different elements. And I think the last thing I'll just comment on this is, we didn't get too much into it, but we're reconciling right now time, right? How we spend our time, how we spend, how does our work apply to our purpose? How do we share that with others? How do we balance our families in that? How do we balance our hobbies, our social lives? And that's applied across the board, and that's cross generational. And I think that, we are at an interconnected world right now where information flows in seconds, and we're also receiving a massive amount of information, more than we've ever had. And we're being asked to upgrade our ability to distill that, to process that, and use new tools and technologies to do that. And that applies to both our personal lives and our professional lives, and where those intermingle. So getting better at that equation is how we help people through that life journey, in my opinion.
And I think with Gen Z, it's really not expecting them to perform like the previous generations, is really seeing how they function well in the environment, creating workspaces. Those are very popular. So instead of putting them into a suite or an office, creating a space for them to be able to um, have various other employees around, so that they can kind of bounce ideas off and have, I forget what the term is, but it's like a doubling. So they can feel that energy with working, but it's managing your expectations as far as who they are and where they are in the moment. And I believe it was Derek who mentioned earlier, is kind of parenting them as well. I think Lucinda mentioned it as well, as is parenting, but not parents. So more or less guiding them, but steering clear of really parenting them, because then they can become a little defensive. So it's offering them that guidance and opportunity to grow and to express themselves, and not fit into kind of like a 1950s, 60s, 70s box. We have to move with the time with them and give them the space to really express themselves.
Absolutely. And I think, Derek, one thing that you said that I really resonated with is the fact that we all have so many different priorities, right? It's not just Gen Z and millennials who are wanting different things. It just depends on what our priorities are. And Paula, to your point about Gen Z, this is a little plug for those of you tuning in live. Next week, we'll be talking about how to build a culture that resonates with the changing priorities for specifically Gen Z and millennials. So as more and more are coming into the workforce and joining teams, and especially taking positions of leadership, how do we build cultures? How do we first understand what they want? How do we build cultures that resonate within our unique organizations, right? We need it to fit within our organizational cultures. And then how do what does that look like to attract and retain that next generation talent? So just a little plug, because I think Paula hit on a lot of nuances around Gen Z. And so I'm excited to talk about that next week. So a little plug there. But as we're getting close on time, I did want to just wrap up with one final question to all three of our panelists. As we look to the future, what emerging trends or innovations do you foresee in the realm of employee well-being and engagement? So what do you see coming ahead, or what should we keep an eye on?
Yeah, I'm seeing companies build a strategy around this. I mean, a very intentional strategy. And maybe Derek, you're seeing this as well, and there, I think within those strategies, we're seeing some trends that companies are offering. So, and this is really more around the whole, mental health care side of things, but to have personalized access to quality care, offering a kind of concierge service. It's really taking a proactive approach, and not getting to a crisis mode where a company, has to help and provide something when it gets to a crisis period, but really being more proactive in that way. Like most programs focus on existing situations rather than taking that proactive approach. But we talked a lot about culture, but being culturally competent in the care that's provided is really important. Offering a diverse and experienced network of practitioners. I attended a session last year where there was a lot of discussion about people aren't going to get the care that they need because they can't find a provider who they can relate to. And then they put that care off, which is terrible. And there's really a shortage of qualified caregivers in this area too, or practitioners. So that's something that companies are really looking at. And then I think Derek mentioned this before, supporting the entire family, not just the employee, but family mental health is really becoming a big focus in the workplace. And it's specialized care. It's care for, the parents, it's care for the children, it's care for others in the household who may be living with the employee. So those are really, some of the things that I'm seeing out there.
Thank you, Lucinda. Yeah, I love the idea of being proactive. And one of the things we talk a lot about at Culturefy is leveraging AI to help identify trends, right? So analyzing vast sums of data. We have all this data that our organizations collect, but sometimes we only scratch the surface of it. And we really rely on those data analysts to get into the weeds. But there are ways that we can utilize AI with simple dashboards that can really help unpack some of these trends. And then, I think we mentioned earlier, I think Paula mentioned the ease of sending out a survey just as a check-in point. How are you doing? What is this, asking about priorities and being able to then, again, analyze that data in real time, quickly, easily, so that then you can take action and say, okay, well, this is what we're going to do. And so then when your people see actual change, it's not just something that is talked about at the high level, but it's actually implemented. That goes a long way in helping to attract, but also retain and engage your people, because they see that my team, my leaders, my organization cares about me as a holistic person, which goes back to a lot of what we were talking about earlier. I just want to throw it out. Any last comments from Derek, from Paula, Lucinda? Thank you guys so much for being here today. I feel like we covered a ton. There's so much more I want to talk about, but I think we had a great, just scratching the surface of this topic.
I'll just kind of echo one thing that Lucinda said, which is that a lot of the existing structures, systems, processes, models of how we do things are being strained, right? We're still experiencing the fallout of where we started this conversation from 4 years ago. And it's across, and we know it's been shown now how interconnected we all are in our work and our personal lives in these different environments, these different structures. And we're seeing in real time a devolution of certain areas that allows us to rebuild and create new, right? And create better. And I think that is the real invitation that we are being given as a collective work environment right now, life environment, what you're going to call it, to help build new ways of doing business, new ways of living, new ways of communicating, and recalibrating our expectations and how we do that. Like I really believe we're still in the early phase of a significant transformation as a global culture, as a human culture, and business is a key environment and a key lever to how that happens. And as I mentioned early on, I think that the last few years were kind of the test run, if you will, for the next level. And I think we're going through that process right now. And I think that it's hard to even predict the level of innovation that could happen right now, because a lot of it is conditional on the way that we all respond.
So I would just like to add is basically just looking at, of course, the trends sometimes goes beyond the data. So making sure that you are also seeking out information for staff members who may not have access to a computer, or who don't engage on a computer on a day-to-day basis. So giving them the options to be able to also participate, to be included in the information in the data. But also the overarching theme of today has been looking and working with the whole person. So I would also encourage organizations to definitely seek out social workers who are trained in looking at the whole person, person and environment, that can really help to build up your programs, to provide certain services to staff that can help to manage some of the areas that may have deficits, and really can help to just cater to that whole person. Mm-hmm. So again, the whole person is very important in employment services now.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. The one thing I wanted to mention real quick too, that I think it's important is finding a mentor in an organization too. So it doesn't have to be this practitioner or, somebody like that. It can be a mentor that somebody selects through a program or a platform. And, it could be a peer mentor. It could be, somebody in a different area, but somebody just to talk to, a buddy, to check in, and, check back with each other. So I just wanted to bring that up too, because there are some really practical, basic things that we can do as well, within our teams using technology.
That's the guy.
Absolutely. I was going to say, I'm super encouraged that this is more of a priority and that there are professionals like Paula out there and organizations like Life Guides who are already doing this and making it easier for organizations. And, you know, a little plug for Culturefy. We're all about helping bring organizations together and unifying teams with technology. So the mentorship program that Lucinda is talking about, we can utilize AI technology to help do that. Workspaces, making it easy to engage with your community, whether they're around the globe or in your same office, and leveraging AI technology to really help empower people so that you're able to identify trends and you're able to be proactive and not reactive as we're navigating into the future, which it sounds like this is only the start of all the changes that we have gone through, and it's just getting started when it comes to navigating how do we really support our people and build cultures that empower them in a way that aligns with our organization and still keeps that authentic, that uniqueness to each of our organizations. So thank you guys so much for being here. If you have questions about unpacking some of these challenges, we would love to hear from you, our team at Culturefy. So please reach out. You can email us at info@culturefy.com or check us out on the website. And we'd love to just hear a little bit more about the unique challenges that you're facing. But thank you guys so much for being here. Paula, Derek, Lucinda, I really appreciate the conversation. Thanks for sharing your expertise, your experiences with us. I think it was a really powerful conversation today.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
And to all of our attendees, thank you so much for joining us today. Again, we will be here this time next week, unpacking what does it look like for building cultures that attract and retain our Gen Z, millennial talent. If you've ever had questions about how to connect, you don't want to miss this upcoming episode. We'll be hearing from leaders in this space as they unpack and they bring you inside the mind and the priorities of Gen Z and millennials. So please tune in next week, spread the word. And we really hope that this conversation just really sparks more conversations within your team around wellness and well-being and how your organization can better support the people that make up your teams. So thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you guys next time.
Excellent.